lifting up Jesus and opening His Word from Australia, Denmark, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Singapore, South Africa, United Kingdom, Thailand, the Philippines, United States, and throughout the world. You're watching Moriel TV.
Well, taking the oath, it usually involves a Bible, but Keith Ellison making waves because as the first Muslim elected to Congress, he wants to be sworn in on the Quran, and that drew fire from talk show host Dennis Prager. Now, Prager's under fire. An Islamic group claims that he's a bigot and should be removed from the taxpayer-funded U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council. With us now is Dennis Prager, along with Nihad Awad. He's the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, the very group charging Prager with bigotry. So, Nihad, to you first. Why are you making this move?
Well, first of all, Neil, thanks for having me. What Keith Ellison, the first Muslim elected to Congress, is doing is he's trying to tell Muslim Americans, non-Muslims, and the whole world that you can be American, you can be Muslim, and you can serve in the Congress, and there's no contradiction between the history, the constitutional values, and tradition of America and being an American Muslim. And we see some people are trying just to stir controversy out of nothing. Number one, when members of Congress are sworn in, they do not have to swear on any holy book. It's done in mass, but in their private ceremony, when they ask for one with the Speaker of the House and members of their families and friends, they can choose any holy book they can.
All right, so if that's their religion, that's what they do. All right, what do you think of that, Dennis?
Well, I thought you asked Mr. Awad what I had said that was bigoted. He made this smear of me that has no truth whatsoever and didn't answer anything you asked. I never said anything against Keith Ellison. I didn't utter a word or write a word against the Quran or Islam. All I said was, for the first time in American history, the Bible has been replaced by another book at a swearing in, and this is a very seminal moment in American history. I said it didn't matter to me if it was the Quran, if it was Dianetics, if it was the Bhagavad Gita, if it was the works of Voltaire. This has nothing to do with the Quran as such. It is whether or not we are now announcing it is no longer an important thing to have the Bible present, the repository of the Judeo-Christian value system that makes America what it is, present at a swearing in. I didn't even say he had to take an oath.
All right, so Neon, what do you think of that? That it's not a bigoted comment as much as it is. Okay. This is the way we have sworn in congressmen and women over the many years, presidents. Bible has always been fine, even those who are not necessarily very religious. And even those who, by the way, later go on to commit a lot of crimes in office. So what is wrong with that now, and why would he be a bigot for saying that?
That's not what he said. If you reread his article, you will find that he's annoyed and outraged, and he's afraid that the fabric of America will change because Keith Ellison, in his private ceremony, is elected to choose the Quran, his holy book. And he forgets that the Hebrew Torah and the Book of Mormons was used by other people, and I haven't seen Dennis Prager or anyone else making any big controversy or even making a note about it. The question
all right,
is...
just on that, Dennis, respond to that in the past we've had those Mormons who've used different texts.
I'm happy to respond. The Bible has always been present. There have been, of the thousands and thousands of Jews who have taken their oath, some on the oath part have only used the Old Testament, which is, of course, part of the Bible that we have in America. About a couple of Mormons have added the Book of Mormon. The Bible is as we know it in America, and I'm Jewish. The New Testament is not my Bible, but I am fighting for the preservation of that Bible. Symbolically, it's all symbolic as the central element. All I'm asking is that Keith Ellison bring a Bible along. I'm not asking him not to bring the Quran. And by the way, you've asked Mr. Awad twice, name anything Dennis Prager said that is bigoted against Islam. He can't. He's lying. CARE is lying. And that is very important here. And I want Keith Ellison to dissociate himself from CARE.
Dennis, I want him to answer. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not the only one who said that he's intolerant. Here's the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. said that his views and comments are intolerant, misinformed, and downright un-American. The New York Sun said today, Mr. Prager not only wrong, but his comments are outrageous and also in our light are almost unbelievably ignorant. We're asking that if he would like to make bigoted statements in his own capacity as a private citizen, he's entitled to it. But when he tries to push religion on the throat of other people, and he's member of the Council of the United States Holocaust Museum.
All right, guys.
That's a taxer paid.
Okay, you've asked 3 times and you haven't gotten a single response.
But I just want to understand one thing very quickly. No. Please, one thing I want to understand very quickly. Now, you would not have a problem with the congressman-elect bringing a Bible and a Quran to the swearing-in, right?
You know what? It's his choice. We cannot force him.
That's all I want to know.
We cannot coerce him.
Thank you.
Let's urge
Dennis,
him.
thank you.
And
Take a quick break here.
impose
Up
on
next,
him.
they can continue talking if they want. Well, it's not only...
Hi, it's Tim from Moriel TV and Moriel Radio. I'm here with James Jacob Prash, who's live in New York City right now. He's in Midtown Manhattan, and this is This Week in Prophecy.
Blessings in Jesus from my native New York. Although my metabolism is still in the Far East, I'm very jet lagged. Nonetheless, the show must go on by God's grace. This Week in Prophecy. And as usual, quite a week it has been, and it is going to be. The forthcoming new year promises to see the unfolding of a number of events, many of them in the Middle East, certainly of prophetic significance. As the civil new year closes, we see what is really taking shape. The main news has to do with the activities of Iran, Syria, and Russia coming ever closer to the Israeli Golan border and also in Lebanon. We will address these developments lastly because there's so much associated with it, and begin rather in the United States this week. The $135,000 fine imposed by a state bureaucrat in Oregon against a couple, Aaron and Melissa Klein, I believe they may be Jewish believers, who owned a bake shop for refusing to make cakes for a lesbian couple because it violated their First Amendment rights, have seen the fine upheld by this godless court. Again, our prayer is for the day when these judges will stand before these judges, the judge. Romans chapter 1 tells us that not only will those who persist in homosexuality and lesbianism be confined for eternity to the lake of fire, but those who give a hearty approval to what they do. This bureaucrat, Brad Venkin, who pioneered the persecution of these believers at the behest of these 2 lesbians, has gained the victory in court today against the First Amendment rights of these 2 believers. Now, many other believers have supported them in prayer and with financial support. It is not the issue of the money, it is the issue of the precedent. It is not an attack on these 2 Christian bakers, it is an attack on the First Amendment rights of all people, and certainly of all Christians.
Well, the U.S. Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, of course. In fact, it's the reason this country exists in the first place. But increasingly, the law in many states is making it harder to be both religious and gainfully employed. Melissa and Aaron Klein were formerly the proprietors of a company called Sweet Cakes by Melissa. It was a bakery. But after refusing to provide a cake for a same-sex wedding, the Kleins were fined $135,000 by the state of Oregon. Last year, they had to close their bakery as a result. They're still fighting, though, and today their case was heard by a state appeals court. We're joined tonight by the Kleins, along with Hiram Sasser of the First Liberty Institute, which was representing them in court. Thanks a lot for joining us, all of you. First,
thanks for having us.
To you, Melissa, there's been so much reporting on this, and so much of it is coming from a very specific perspective that is hostile to you, that I just want to establish exactly what happened. You all did not refuse to serve customers because they were gay, as I understand it. You merely refused to participate in any way in a ceremony you believe violated your religious beliefs. Is that a fair distinction?
Well, actually, Tucker, I have to kind of interrupt. You know, there's a gag order in this case where it's actually being interpreted by one of the commissioners at the Bureau of Labor and Industries that they can't even really talk about what actually happened. And so we have to be very careful because of this gag order. So it's not just the...
Wait, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop you there. What do you mean you can't talk about? I mean, not only so they're dismantled the entire First Amendment, the religious liberty part, and the freedom of speech part. Why can't you describe what happened? Something that's been described in a lot of news stories. I don't understand.
Yeah, hey, that's exactly right. I can tell you what happened a little bit, but unfortunately, the Kleins they're gagged by this gag order. That's part of what this case is all about. It's not just about being fined with, or actually damages of $135,000. It's such a soul-crushing penalty that put them out of business. That's not good enough. Now, actually, there's an extra part, and you can't really talk about it. And so that's part of the case that's going on right now.
Let me ask a much more general question. And I
Sure.
think people have read a lot of stories about this, and I just want to be totally clear. As a general matter to both Kleins, did you have a practice of not serving gay people because they were gay?
No, we had no such litmus test for customers. We served everybody, no matter who they were, every walk of life. I mean, that's part of being open to the public.
And these two women were in fact return customers.
Right. Okay. So they've been there before, and you served them no problem. So I think we can all assume that the problem was you didn't want to participate in a ceremony in any way that you felt violated your religious beliefs. So my question to you, and I've been thinking this since this story began, what do you make of the coverage of this? The Oregonian, which is your newspaper, one of the newspapers in Oregon, described this quote, and they used quotation marks around the phrase religious liberty, as if it was a concept they were unfamiliar with or something only right-wingers cared about. Do you think this case has received fair coverage?
It really depends on what a news outlet you go with. I mean, we've seen a lot of false stories out there, a lot of things that totally mischaracterized us, what happened. And really what it comes down to is, I mean, it's hard to find truth in media when it comes to things like this because there's so much misinformation out there.
Right. So you've been, as I'm sure you know, characterized as hating gay people when it's much more specific. Now, to your attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but the precedent this sets is that the state can force people to violate their religious beliefs. I mean, presumably they could force, I don't know, a kosher butcher to sell bacon or a Catholic hospital to commit abortion, or your religious beliefs are no protection against force from the state. Is that correct?
Yeah, what's unfortunate about this is that we have people of goodwill on all sides, and you know, we live in a pluralistic society. We've got to try to figure out how to get along, and what we're just simply fighting for is tolerance and respect and the dignity of all people to be able to carry out their lives in the way that they see fit. And everyone struggles how to both follow their faith, but also interact with others. And it's just really sad that the government has decided to come in here in Oregon and put their thumb on the scale and say, no, your beliefs, your way is wrong, and we're going to punish you with basically a lifetime crushing penalty.
Of course, abetted by their mindless handmaidens in the press who hate you for other reasons, cultural reasons. So when are we going to find out the outcome of this? When's the ruling coming down?
It's going to take a number of months probably before we receive the ruling, but whatever the ruling is, I'm fairly certain that one side or the other will appeal, and this will probably make its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so people can follow this case at firstlibertyinstitute.org at our website.
Let me just be totally clear. You don't have to be a Christian or even a religious person to have an interest in the outcome of this. It affects all of us in a deep way. Thanks a lot for joining us, all of you. Thanks.
We pray that this will be taken further in the judicial process, even to the Supreme Court, and that it will be reversed. We also pray that the hand of God's judgment will fall on those who are persecuting our brethren. We would, of course, rather see them get saved. We would rather see them get saved than not go to the lake of fire. Nonetheless, we are still confronted with what Romans 1 tells us. God gives them over. People who are given to homosexuality and lesbianism are given over to it by God to think it's normal in judgment. That is why they're becoming so militant, radical, and demanding, not knowing that they're arrogant. And their militancy is symptomatic of the fact that they're bound for eternal damnation with no possible recourse. It is almost impossible for people like that to get saved based on Romans 1. Almost impossible. All right, you cannot say it is absolutely impossible, but Romans 1 tells us it is almost impossible because God has given them over. He's also given over the state bureaucrat and these corrupt judges. May God's judgment be fast and swift, and may true justice prevail for our brethren, Aaron and Melissa. Please keep them in this situation in prayer. This week in prophecy, as we've been saying many times, the rescue of Lot is used in the New Testament to teach about what happens before the rapture of the church. Well, we're going to see an increase in homosexual radicalism and militancy. I do not hate homosexuals and lesbians. I have known homosexuals and lesbians who've actually gotten saved and become brethren in Christ. I would far prefer to see them repent and believe the gospel. Their sin is no worse than my sin. I was a cocaine addict. Their sin is no worse than mine. My sin would have put me in hell, but theirs is surely going to put them in hell unless they repent and believe. What we're seeing is prophecy coming into play. This is the way it's going to be before Jesus returns. Don't look for a good life or a good home in this world. Look to wind up like Lot and his family, needing to be rescued by the hand of the Lord. This week in prophecies. Let us continue. The false narrative in the media has been this. Although Muslim nations with gross human rights abuses, gross women's rights abuses, gross persecution of Christians surround Israel, they outpopulate Israel, they're much bigger than Israel, they're much wealthier than Israel, are continually defeated and unable to conquer Israel. Thus, they make themselves out to be the underdog, which they are not. The so-called Palestinians are simply Jordanians who call themselves Palestinians, and they're simply like any other Arabs. They're not a distinct nation and never have been. It is the Israelis who are the underdogs. But the left-wing media help them portray themselves as the underdogs. They commit acts of terror, they fire Katyusha rockets when the Israelis retaliate. They are the victims, they are the underdogs. And of course, the left-wing media helps them propagate this. This, of course, is the absolute lie. We see that these countries and governments who do this and who pander to them, particularly in Europe, repeatedly find themselves, their own selves, the victims of Islamic radical terror, radical Islamist terror. Again, Obadiah, verse 15, comes into play against that, as does Genesis 12, 1-3. The false narrative goes on. One of the false narratives has been this lie of Israeli human rights abuses discriminately targeted. One of the misrepresentations of the false narrative have been that of Israeli targeted human rights abuses to in some way insult or belittle people for being Arab or being Muslim. This is, of course, a lie. The internet and media have been showing an incident where a Arab Palestinian woman, age 19, had been slapping Israeli soldiers in the face, just standing there slapping them, trying to provoke a retaliation for the cameras that would be shown on the news that would make her into some kind of a victim. She was, of course, a self-made stooge. This was the game that she was playing, but the game did not work. She was, however, arrested, and she will face prosecution. Nonetheless, the attempt was made, and it will show you the desperation to which these attempts take place. Her name is Ahmed Tamimi. Ahmed Tamimi. She's just going up to Israeli soldiers on duty and begin slapping them and insulting them to their face, violently hitting them. I personally disagree with the way the Israelis handled it. I don't agree with the way the Israeli soldiers and military handled it. They arrested her, they brought her to justice, or are bringing her to justice, but I don't agree with them standing there and letting her slap them. Nonetheless, it does show the Israelis exercised restraint. It shows they did not look for an excuse, much less even allow themselves to target Arabs or an Arab woman for any kind of physical abuse. They simply stood there and essentially took it, although the woman was finally arrested. Again, I don't agree with the way it was handled. She should have been handcuffed and retaliated against physically by Israeli military policewomen. that's what should have happened in the interest of justice and to make a public example of it. I don't agree with the way the Israelis handled it, but it does show their restraint and their civility, and that they did not allow themselves to be set up by the left-wing media or by Palestinian Authority or others inimical to them. Meanwhile, an Arab Christian from an Israeli village, Lina Mahur, won first prize in the Israeli national singing competition called The Voice, Hakol. Very popular TV show for singers. It's a kind of a talent show, and it's a big deal in Israel in popular culture and in Israeli modern entertainment. The Voice. Lina Mahur won first prize, an Arab Christian girl. We say congratulations, Kol HaKavod. She did an excellent job, and she has a beautiful, beautiful voice. Again, there is no discrimination in popular Israeli culture against peaceful Arabs. They are welcomed as co-countrymen. And at any given time, on a voluntary basis, 20,000 Arabs, a number of them Arab Christians, are serving in the Israeli military. So are a number of Arab Bedouins with their national loyalty to the Jewish state, because they know their standard of living and human rights and social justice is much higher under the Israelis than it is or would be under most Islamic governments. This is the reality that they and the left do not want you to hear. But this week in prophecy, it has come to a head with Ached Tamimi. She has thankfully been arrested. Nonetheless, let's continue. This week in prophecy. The IDF, the Israeli military and defense ministry, have announced that the F-35, the American F-35, will be a standard cornerstone aircraft for the next generation of the Israeli Air Force and air defenses.
Major Daniel Chip and Dollar and Major Elijah Animal Super, welcome to Israel.
We, the fighter pilots of the Israeli Air Force, are proud to escort the first Adir aircraft on their first landing on Israeli ground. We wish you best of luck in building the foundations for all Adir squadrons to come, contributing to the strength and glory of the Israeli Air Force, Israeli Defense Forces, and the State of Israel.
Ladies and gentlemen, on your right now, the first Adir jet.
מיד אחריו יגיע ה-902.
Right after him, the 902 will land.
גבירותיי ורבותיי, מטוסי האדיר. קהל מתבקש לשבת. כעת תברך את הטייסים. Major Daniel Chip and Dollar and Major Elijah Animal Super, welcome to Nevatim Air Force Base, welcome to Israel. We are sure that you have had a long journey, and we would like to demonstrate our appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a hand.
Thank you. And what a beautiful, beautiful song. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. And President Rivlin, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Lieberman, my friend, General Eisenkot, General Eshel, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be back in Israel and to join all of you here at Nevatim for this historic ceremony. This evening, we're celebrating the remarkable progress of the U.S. Israel defense relationship, and also of an Air Force that began by flying leftover World War II planes and is now flying the most advanced aircraft in history. These F-35 stealth fighters are the first of 50 aircraft that will help build the future of the Israeli Air Force. And that's thanks to an historic memorandum of understanding we signed this year, in which the U.S. pledged an unprecedented $38 billion in security assistance over the next decade. And as of today, Israel is our first and only friend in the region that's flying F-35. And it's my honor to be here marking the delivery of these planes, the Adir, to America's closest friend and ally in the region. During my time as Secretary of Defense, I've traveled across this nation, from the northern border under threat from Hezbollah to Nevatim here in the south today. And during these visits, I've seen firsthand some of the threats you face daily from many different directions. That's one of the many reasons why the United States is committed to providing Israel with the most advanced military capables, critical not only to ensure Israel can defend itself, but also to maintain its qualitative military edge. And of course, there's no better symbol of the U.S. commitment to Israel's security than the F-35, the most capable aircraft in the skies. Now, I'm told that in Hebrew, Adir means the mighty one, which is an apt name for an aircraft that represents the full force of military might. From its stealth technology to its fighter capabilities, the F-35 will allow pilots to evade detection and fly at supersonic speeds while conducting air defense, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and ground attack missions. It also features advanced sensors and data collection capabilities that allow it to share data with other aircraft. These information sharing features in particular make it an ideal aircraft for joint and coalition operations, which will help the United States and Israeli Air Forces operate more jointly and more effectively than ever before. Together, we will dominate the skies. As we celebrate Israel's new F-35s this evening, it's worth noting how important Israeli companies, as well as U.S. companies, were to the creation of this state-of-the-art aircraft. From wing production to the helmet-mounted display to fuselage components, Israel's innovative technologies have helped define this aircraft and its capabilities. That's one example of many that shows how our partnership benefits the security of both of our nations. While the F-35 is an important symbol of America's commitment to Israel's qualitative military edge, it's only the most recent example of how our security cooperation continues to soar to new heights. We're maintaining robust military assistance and funding critical missile defense systems like the Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, to name a few. We've also expanded our cooperation into new domains, including space and cyberspace in the last few years, to prepare for 21st century threats. And we'll continue to provide Israel with the most advanced capabilities, including more F-35 Adirs, to further sharpen its qualitative military edge. As we gather here today, the U.S.-Israel defense relationship is stronger than it's ever been, and America's pledge to defend Israel's security remains unwavering. Indeed, with the current turmoil in the region, we're more committed to Israel's security today than ever before. And from World War II surplus at the dawn of the Israeli state to stealth fighters today, the United States will continue to stand by its ally and friend, Israel, as we have from the very beginning. And will continue to do long into the future. Thank you.
The F-22 is also a factor, but the F-35 was one that begged some question. In these latest generation, fifth generation of fighter aircraft, the helmet has become part of the aerial navigation and air-to-air combat system, allowing pilots to have 360-degree vision. The helmet, again, that's integral to the avionics package of the F-35, is jointly developed by the American Collins Rockwell, based in Iowa, and the Israeli high-tech company Elbit. So the helmets that are being used, and they will be used by the United States Air Force as well, are co-developed by the Israeli Elbit company together with Collins Rockwell in a joint defense effort. I applaud the move. I think it is wise. I think the F-35 will prove to be a very, very effective aircraft, even against the newer generation of Chinese and Russian stealth fighters. This week in prophecy, things are indeed stepping up. The Israelis are obviously gearing for something to come in the future. They may not know what it is, but the Word of God certainly tells us what it is. This week in prophecy, in Massachusetts, in the United States, an absolute disgrace. We've already seen Congressman Ellis, a Muslim, who took his oath on the Koran, extremely left-wing, extremely anti-Semitic, and has been charged openly with anti-Semitism by Alan Dershowitz and by others, has now found a potential partner in Congress. The Council of American Islamic Relations board member, Matur Haddad, will run for Congress from the very liberal state of Massachusetts. Again, we are reminded that in the aftermath of September 11th, 3 senior members of CAIR were unindicted co-conspirators in raising funds illicitly to fund Islamic terror organizations. Why this woman is allowed to run for Congress, only an absurd liberal state could propose a justification. There is no justification. This woman should not be allowed to run for Congress. She should not be allowed to run for anything. If possible, she should probably be denationalized and sent to an Islamic country, given her loyalties are obviously to the CAIR agenda, which are anti-American. They are not American, and I say that publicly. Anybody who is funded from states that are undemocratic, that are supportive of Aliyah, that are supportive of Sharia, cannot be said to be pro-democratic. They may claim to be American and to believe in democratic values, but they're funded by those who are not, and they are funded by those who are Sharia. Sharia is fundamentally incompatible with the American Constitution. Nobody with any loyalty to Sharia, based on religion or anything else, should be allowed to become a United States citizen, nor should any organization that is pro-Sharia be given any legal status to exist in the United States. It should be classified as a hate group. Now, we can go on to this. They can threaten to sue me. They can do all kinds of things. But it is my conviction that no organization that is pro-Sharia or funded or sponsored by those who are pro-Sharia should be looked upon as having American or democratic values or should be tolerated in the USA. For years, we have called upon the CAIR to be investigated by Congress. It should have been outlawed after September 11th when 3 of its officials were found as unindicted co-conspirators. But now we have this woman in the state of Elizabeth Warren looking to run for Congress, Matur Haddad. Let us hope and pray that there's enough people with common sense in Massachusetts not to vote for this horrible, horrible woman or give any platform to this wicked anti-American organization that she represents, the CAIR. The Trump administration has this week announced its policies of beginning to crack down on radical Islamic organizations in the United States and Islamic organizations receiving funding. One of these organizations is the Muslim Public Affairs Council, the MPAC, that received $398,000 in U.S. taxpayer money. Now, why, under the Obama administration, did the Obama administration take our money as American citizens and give it to this Islamic organization, the Muslim Public Affairs Council? Why? It's being ended by Mr. Trump, and indeed it needs to be. But it goes well beyond this. This organization has been led by such people as Adina Elkovic, who wrote the book, The Spirit of Jihad. The Spirit of Jihad. And they're getting public funding. There's no end to it. Mr. Trump this week has also warned Russia of its giving a green light to the movement of Syrian, Hezbollah, and Iranian forces closer to the Israeli border and giving platform to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and others aligned with the support of Hezbollah closer to Israel. I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. Mr. Putin has indeed cursed Israel, and an Islamic terrorist attack has happened this week in St. Petersburg, Russia. Mr. Putin reaps what he has sowed. Once more, the word of God proves true. Another Islamic terror attack in Russia this week in prophecy. Keep supporting radical Islam, Mr. Putin, and you will reap what you sow. Russia will pay the consequences of your corrupt actions. It's happening as we speak this week in prophecy. Let's continue. Attacks happened this week in the form of firebombs being tossed at Jewish worshippers in the Arab village of Kif al-Harat. Now, Kif al-Harat is an Arab village built on top of or just above a Jewish town, a traditional Jewish town. It is the burial place of Joshua ben Nun, the prophet Joshua. Jewish worshippers were attacked by firebombs thrown by Arab Muslims. Can we imagine what would have happened if Arab Muslims going to the Mosque of Aqsa or the Mosque of Omar were attacked by Jewish militants throwing firebombs? The world would be in an uproar, but predictably, no one has said anything this week in prophecy. Attacks on Jews worshiping at the traditional burial site of Joshua ben Nun, the prophet Joshua. Again, as always, it is a one-way street. This week in prophecy, the Trump administration is beginning to look at the issue of the misuse of visas to enter the United States by radical or by criminal clergy. The R1 visa was introduced by the State Department in the 1990s to supplement the decline of Roman Catholic priests available in the United States. The Roman Catholic Church has not provided any documentation as to how many Roman Catholic priests have entered the country who've been found implicated in pedophilia or the sexual abuse of children. There has been a long-standing suspicion of clergy, particularly priests from Ireland and Brazil, who may have been involved in pedophilia, but the issue has never been publicly addressed. Nonetheless, the Bush administration, ever anxious to please the Saudi Arabians, and the Obama administration, that has been pro-radical Islamic from day one, has generously provided visas to all manner of Islamic clergy, including those who are vocally anti-Semitic, anti-American, pro-Sharia, etc. Going back even to the Clinton administration, the blind sheikh, notorious for the first attacks pre-September 11th on the World Trade Center in New York, that is Rahman, the so-called blind sheikh, as he came to be known, Omar Abdul Rahman, entered the country on such an R1 religious visa. We also now have the Imam Ahmed Shaheen, who preached about killing Jews in Davis, California, coming in on a student visa, remaining a perpetual graduate student of Islamic studies. Why is that man given a visa to stay in the United States as a student when that is what he's here to actually do? At least two of the September 11th hijackers, at least two of them, overstayed student visas. And now we find the New Jersey Islamic cleric, Ahmed El-Kasabi, who we spoke about last week on This Week in Prophecy, who called for genocide of the Jews, again, was admitted to the United States on an R1 clergy visa. The clergy visa should not be used to import pedophiles into the United States. Neither should it be used to import proponents of Sharia, anti-Semitism, hatred, or radical Islamic terror. But it has been done. We pray that the Trump administration will reverse the policies that were entertained by Clinton, by the Bush administration, and above all, by the Obama administration, these anti-American policies of giving easy visas to the enemies of America, to the enemies of Christianity, to the enemies of moderate Muslims, and to the enemies of Israel and the Jews. They should not be coming into the United States on student visas or clergy visas or tourist visas, despite the protests of the organized left, of the Council of American Islamic Relations, or of these left-wing agenda judges. Please may the Lord give favor and grace. Please may these cases be taken to a Supreme Court that will reverse the decisions of these judges who betrayed the country. May the Lord give grace and wisdom and courage to the Trump administration to reverse these anti-American policies of the Obama administration and of the Bush administration, as well as of Bill Clinton. This has got to stop. We should not be importing radical clergy who teach an anti-American message, who teach a message of hatred, who teach a message that is anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Constitution, but pro-Sharia and pro-abuse of human rights and civil rights. We should not be bringing these people into the country, despite the favorability of left-wing judges to allow them to do so in the name of human rights. May the Supreme Court take these cases on and reverse the decision of those judges who betrayed the country, and may the political left find themselves in defeat, and the proponents of democratic values find themselves in victory. Again, we would point out that moderate Muslims are themselves among the victims of these radical elements. We are not against Muslim people, but we are against radical Islam. Let us continue. This Week in Prophecy. A series of salvos have increased against Israel from the Gaza Strip. The most recent was on the 19th of December. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman promised these would stop, as did senior IDF officials and the Chief of Staff. They have not, however, been able to completely stop them. Following a salvo of 3, 2 of which were intercepted by the Iron Dome, one hitting a public ceremony at Jafar.
The Syrian army has fired at least 4 surface-to-air missiles at Israeli aircraft as the regime launched an attack against the western countryside of Syria's capital Damascus, reports say. The Arabic-language Al-Masdar news agency, citing an unnamed source, said the Syrian military's anti-aircraft missiles were fired from the Meza airbase in rural Damascus in the early hours of Saturday. The source added that an Israeli fighter jet was flying at a low altitude over Lebanon's Baalbek region near Syria's border when the Syrian missiles were launched. The news agency, citing an unnamed military source, reported that a number of Israeli missiles were fired toward the 1st Division ammo depot in the western countryside of Damascus, adding that the Syrian air defense managed to intercept some of the projectiles before hitting their designated target. However, some of the missiles hit their intended target, causing loud explosions near the towns of Keswer and Sania, the source further added. Over the past few years, the Israeli military has launched sporadic attacks against various targets on Syrian soil, in assaults landed by Syria as attempts to boost the terror groups wreaking havoc on the country. On September 7th, at least 2 Syrian soldiers were killed after Israeli fighter jets targeted an army position in the west-central province of Hama, just days after the Syrian army broke the siege imposed by the Takfiri terror group on the eastern city of Deir al-Zor. On several occasions, the Syrian army has also confiscated Israeli-made arms and military equipment from terrorists fighting the government forces. Israel has also been providing medical treatment to the extremist militants wounded in Syria.
The Israeli Air Force inflicted airstrikes on the training camp of the Hamas movement in the north of the Gaza Strip in response to missile attacks on the country. As explained in Israel Defense Forces, they consider the terrorist organization Hamas responsible for any hostile act from the Gaza Strip. Let's recall that on Sunday night in Israel, an air alert was triggered due to 2 missiles launch. During the fighting in Syria, the government forces captured settlements to the west of Hanasira, in the west of the province of Aleppo, Rashidia, Razm al-Bid, Razm Sail. As we reported earlier, the Syrian Arab Army launched an offensive towards the Abu Dukur airbase. A large-scale offensive is planned, a mobilization is declared. The operation is supported by forces from the northeast of the province of Kama, where, as we reported earlier, the units of Tiger Force have arrived. The mobilization was also announced by the group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The AFU shelled the positions of the People's Militia of the LPR 14 times during the past day. Kalinovo, Frunze, Logvinovo, Kalinovka, Jalobak, Kalinovo-Bershkovatoy and Kristovoy were subjected to shelling by means of artillery installations, mortars of various caliber, arms of infantry fighting vehicles, grenade launchers, and small arms. During the past day the AFU units violated the ceasefire 17 times in the DPR. During the shelling, artillery, mortars of various caliber, grenade launchers, and small arms were used. The districts of 10 frontline settlements of the Republic fell under the enemy fire. The pre-election campaign 2018 is officially launched today in Russia. The elections are held in 90 days, on March 18, 2018. According to the CEC, 23 people, including the incumbent President Vladimir Putin who plans to run as an independent, are going to be nominated for the post. Now self-nominees must submit documents to the Central Election Commission within 20 days, and those nominated from the party within the next 25 days. After that the committee will check and issue a permit to collect signatures. Alexei Yulyukayev's defense plans to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR. The ex-Minister of Economic Development was sentenced to 8 years for bribery. This week I will appeal against the sentence. Let's see what decision the appellate court will make, then we'll think about appealing to the ECHR, while it's too early to talk about it, said lawyer Kvades. Let's recall that the court sentenced Yulyukayev to 8 years in a strict regime colony for receiving $2 million in bribes from the head of Rosneft. Yesterday, Russian strategic missile forces celebrated the 58th anniversary. In the coming year, it is planned to conduct 12 launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles, in particular, in order to test the design for the promising projects. Last year, the SMF carried out 5 missile launches.
Are designed by Hamas to sabotage peace efforts by the Egyptians to bring peace to the Gaza border that would allow normal trade and a normal influx of goods and services to Gaza that would be to the benefit of the inhabitants of Gaza as well as to the Israelis who live adjacent to the border. Egyptian efforts have been hampered repeatedly, not by political means or by legal means, but by violent means. The Israelis were forced to strike back with airstrikes, hitting northern Gaza in retaliation against this latest salvo of Hamas attacks with Katyushas. This week in prophecy. This week in prophecy. It is reported by British intelligence and by the NATO command that there are probably 300 British-born ISIS fighters now harboring in Turkey following the Trump administration's destruction of most of ISIS in Iraq and in eastern Syria. 300 have taken refuge in Turkey. These are Muslims born in Britain. This underlines and highlights the reality that a Muslim is a Muslim is a Muslim. That a fundamentalist Muslim is a Rottweiler. You cannot guarantee a Rottweiler will always be a loyal pet. A Rottweiler has the capacity to revert to its instincts. And the instincts of radical Islam, of fundamentalist Islam, is that of jihad. Now again, we point out that there are moderate Muslims who are not jihadists, who do not believe that Sharia should be imposed on Western countries. But those who do are Rottweilers and should be seen and treated as Rottweilers. It is the Muslims who are peaceful, who are not proponents of imposing Sharia on the United States, on Britain, and on Europe and other countries, who should be allowed to live peaceably. Fundamentalists should not be allowed to live peaceably. They should not be allowed to live in Western countries at all. Their loyalty is plainly to radical interpretations of Islam, and they should be removed from Western democracies and denationalized. 300. Now, these 300 have the legal right at the moment to return to Britain and to the UK to kill, to murder, and to maim. We're not speaking of moderate Muslims. We're speaking of ISIS fighters who are British citizens, a number of them British-born. This Week in Prophecy. This Week in Prophecy, December 29th, 10 Coptic Christian worshippers have been shot dead in a church at Marmina, near at the Helwan, south of Cairo. Helwan is an area not far from some of the pyramids.
امي هو اللي مات ده مش ضابط يا قلبي يا قلبي
Saqqara. It's a tourist area. It is an area where there are Christian communities, and 10 were shot dead. Among the 10 shot dead, among the victims have been 2 policemen. Again, we continue to wish Mr. Assisi well in his crackdown on radical Islam and on the motherhood inside of Egypt. Although the Obama administration took the side of the Muslim Brotherhood, it was pro-Islamic terror in its policies in Egypt. Fortunately, Mr. Assisi came to power. Now, we do not always agree with General Assisi. We do not agree with his vote in the UN concerning Israel. But we do think he genuinely wants to preserve peace with Israel, and he wants to preserve the human rights of Christians inside of Egypt. 10 more killed in Egypt by radical Islam this week in prophecy. This week in prophecy, the British Major General, Jeremy Gendry, announced that Syria is allowing ISIS to regroup and have a resurgence in certain areas under Syrian control. Officially, Russia, Syria, and Iran were opposed to ISIS. But when it's in their political interests, they allow ISIS to regroup. This proves that Turkey is not a reliable ally. It certainly proves that the rhetoric of Mr. Putin and of the Assad government of Syria is simply that, rhetoric. They are not fighting ISIS except when ISIS is a threat to them. They're quite happy to entertain and host ISIS when ISIS is a threat to Israel or to Western interests. You cannot deal with these people on a fair and equitable basis. Mr. Trump has again raised his complaint to Mr. Putin for allowing this. And while he blames Syria and he blames Russia, he has agreed not to attack positions under the control of Turkey and of the Assad regime backed by Russia. This was part of the agreement, that the Russians would not attack those areas under the control of America and the NATO allies. Nonetheless, what we see happening is very, very serious. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is now repairing a road extending from the Iranian border via areas of Iraq into Syria, known as the Ni'ar Az-Azud Palmyra Road, allowing a thoroughfare, a direct freeway for the transportation of arms, munitions, supplies, and Revolutionary Guard personnel from Iran to come into Syria and to Lebanon in support of Hezbollah and of the Assad regime. Their goal is plainly to establish an Iranian military presence on the Israeli border. We've been warning that this has been happening and that a scenario is beginning to take shape. The Trump administration has issued only warnings thus far. But the Iranian general Soleimani has called for a war of attrition. And all of the actions of Russia, to a degree Syria, and certainly the Assad regime, have been in support of preparing for a war of attrition against Israel. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has snapped off Palestinian Authority ties to the U.S. in such a manner as it is transpiring piece by piece. There is no package funding, individual programs and projects of funding, and these will be suspended one by one if Mr. Trump keeps his pace. As we said, and as we hope will happen, the Trump administration should and has tentatively agreed to close down the Palestinian Authority Liaison Office in Washington. This is a good thing. The Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is not and has never been a reliable partner for peace, any more than his predecessor, Yasser Arafat, was. There is no viable peace partner from within the so-called Palestinian Arab unity. Not Hamas and not the Palestinian Authority. They're essentially six of one, half dozen of the other. Nonetheless, American aid has begun to be cut, and Mr. Trump has been taking the correct action. The correct action, of course, commenced with his decision to implement the congressional funding that has been lingering for nearly 20 years to relocate the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem as a recognized capital. Guatemala has followed suit. The Czech Republic is considering it, and there are a total of 10 nations, 10, considering relocating their capitals now to Jerusalem. This has been a step forward led by Mr. Trump. Again, we do not agree with all of his Middle East policies, particularly those concerning the Kurds. Although there may be factors we are not aware of strategically and politically, we continue to reiterate that the Kurds are the only people in Iraq who the United States and the West can trust to any degree. We should not be trying to placate the Turks. They are not our friends. Although, again, there are political considerations concerning what would happen on the rapprochement between Russia and Turkey, as Turkey, in principle, at least nominally, remains a member of NATO. Erdogan cannot be trusted or believed, and the United States must publicly view Turkey as a NATO ally, but privately view Turkey as an enemy of the West. The goal plan of Iran is obviously, with the backing of Russia, to, in league with Hezbollah and the Assad regime in Syria, bring Iranian forces to the border of Israel and the Golan. This week in prophecy, some very, very serious developments along this line have indeed begun to take place. There are now positions 6 kilometers from the Israeli border of the Golan in the area of the foothills of Mount Hermon. It's taken place this week. Syrians have arrived at Bet Jin, near Mount Hermon. It is very close, perhaps less than 1 mile, from the Druze village that is not backing the Assad regime, Hadar. This is only 5 miles from the Israeli border. This is only 5 kilometers, approximately 3 miles from the Israeli border, and is now in the crosshairs of a Iranian-backed attack on a Druze village. The Druze population of Lebanon are not supportive of Syria. The Druze population of Israel are supportive of Israel. The Druze population of Syria are not supportive of Assad. The Druze factor may be a determining an armed conflict between Israel and Iran on the Golan Heights border. Israel would feel obligated to protect the Druze population if it were attacked, given the fact that they have family members who are Israeli citizens living close by on the Israeli side of the barbed wire. Now, those familiar with the area know the history of this. You can actually see people with megaphones in better times talking to each other from the same family. Has anyone been born in our family? Has anyone been married? Because the Assad regime would not allow any border crossings of the indigenous Druze population. The area where these attacks may come from eventually are the area of Kunitra. Now, if you've been to the Golan Heights, Kunitra is visible to the naked eye easily without binoculars from the Israeli side of the border. It is a place of military observation posts and so forth, but tourists visit it and look out at Syria. They look at the village of Kunitra. That is how close things are becoming. It is a powder keg, and the powder keg can explode. It indirectly involves Russia. It directly involves Iran and Syria, and in Lebanon it involves Hezbollah. Again, what we have is a mounting powder keg. It is very serious. It is not given major coverage by the media as yet, but the Israelis know what's going on. The Pentagon certainly knows what is going on. The CIA and the intelligence establishment absolutely knows what's going on. A powder keg. We're talking something now only a few miles. The Israelis warned, and they have said they will not allow Iranian positions close to the Israeli border, but now they are becoming close to the Israeli border. The Israelis have not reacted to what happened at Beijing. But if the neighboring Druze village of Hadar is attacked, and it's less than a mile away, expect the possibility of trouble. You can already hear explosions and gunfire from the Israeli side of the border. You can already hear ordnance being detonated in the Kunitra region from the Israeli side of the border. Sometimes you can even see smoke from the military observation points up on Mount Hermon. Now, again, the presence of the Syrians this close to Israel is the fault of Henry Kissinger, going back to the inequitable ceasefire he arranged after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. It's the fault of Henry Kissinger. It never should have happened. They were pushed back and should have remained pushed back and not be given positions so close to Israel to begin with. Israel should have positions much closer to Damascus. Nonetheless, what's done is done. Kissinger did his damage. If you have a fanatical Iran on the Israeli border of the Golan Heights, in league with Assad, their fellow Shias, the Alawite Muslim sect that controls Syria, are a sect of Shia, and Hezbollah, you have a formula for major, major trouble. This, however, has strikingly not gone without protest in Iran, something that would have been thought unthinkable at one time is taking place. The Revolutionary Guards are, of course, cracking down, but the Iranian government knows what is happening. They have to, because the demonstrators have reached numbers of 50 to 60,000. It began against financial corruption, protests against the financial corruption outside of the house of Khomeini, Khomeini's residence in Tehran, asking, where is the money, where is the money of Iran's religious ruler that controls essentially the government. The Islamic theocracy controls the government. Where's the money, where's the money? But now it has expanded into political protest. Again, tens of thousands of Iranians who do not want conflict with Israel or with America or with the West are chanting no to Lebanon, no to Syria, and no to Rouhani, the Iranian president who was promoting these policies of establishing a strategic corridor with Hezbollah and with Assad. They're protesting the government. They're protesting Iranian involvement in Lebanon and in Syria and a potential conflict with Israel and with the West. These voices, of course, will be squashed in Iran. Expect nothing but treachery and duplicity from Turkey or from Mr. Putin. But something has to give sooner or later. If anyone understood the situation in the Golan Heights at the moment and how precarious it's become and didn't blow a signal, an alarm, they must have a reason for not doing so. We can speculate that perhaps Israeli, American governments are trying to play it down for the moment for strategic reasons. Perhaps there is ongoing negotiation secretly with Mr. Putin. But it is not unthinkable that there could be a war on the Syrian border and on the Lebanese border within a matter of months if things continue the way they are. Now again, in the Middle East, is there going to be a war? It's like asking, is there going to be a snowstorm in Alaska? The question is not if there's going to be a snowstorm, but when. Well, is there going to be a war? Well, there's no question. When? Will it be a Gog and Magog scenario? Eventually, it very well may be. But we know what's happening now. If it keeps going the way it is going, some kind of a conflict is inevitable. Meanwhile, this week in prophecy, Iranian weapons captured in Yemen have been put on display by, not the Saudi Arabians, but by the American government. The conflict between Sunni and Shia, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, has become absolutely paramount. Neither Saudi Arabia or the Gulf states anymore see Israel as their chief problem or their chief enemy in the Middle East. They see the enemy as Iran. We're talking here about the realities of Daniel chapter 10. That is this week in prophecy. Please pray for President Trump, for Mr. Netanyahu, for the American forces in Afghanistan and in Syria. Please pray for the IDF. Please pray against the regime in Iran and against Mr. Putin. He's no friend of anybody but himself. Please pray for moderate Muslims. Again, we reiterate, we do not hate Muslims. Our conflict is with radical Muslims and the proponents of Sharia who want to bring Sharia to the West and who are funded by pro-Sharia interests in countries. That is why we don't like CAIR and others like it. That is why we don't like Linda Sarsour. But we have no problem with moderate Muslims who want to live in peace and not force Sharia on others. None. We do not advocate the deportation of moderate Muslims or the denationalization of moderate Muslims. Not at all. Never have. We're not against these people. Whether we agree with their religion or not, we are not against them personally. But when it comes to Sharia and Jihad, an enemy must be called an enemy. And we applaud the Trump administration from distancing itself from the hypocrisy and cowardice of George Bush and of Barack Obama and calling radical Islam what it is. That has been this week in prophecy. My name is Jacob Prasch, coming to you from New York City. God bless, and we wish all of you a very happy and very blessed civil new year. In Jesus. Thank you.
I speak so often about Iran because I read history. When tyrants call for the destruction of my people, I believe them. I don't have the luxury of discounting their genocidal threats. So let me reiterate Israel's policy. We will not allow a regime hell-bent on the annihilation of the Jewish state to acquire nuclear weapons. We will not allow that regime to entrench itself militarily in Syria, as it seeks to do, for the express purpose of eradicating our state. Recently, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia referred to Iran's supreme leader as the new Hitler of the Middle East. Obviously, there are some important differences between Nazi Germany and the Islamic Republic of Iran. But both regimes do have two important things in common. One, a ruthless commitment to impose tyranny and terror, and second, a ruthless commitment to murder Jews. My friends, one day the Iranian regime will fall. Iranian mothers and fathers will rejoice in the streets. Israel will be the first in line to restore relations and rebuild our great partnership.